I'm 75 years old, and this year I finally closed my door to 5 kinds of people. I did it quietly, no shouting, no slammed doors, not one bitter argument at the end. For most of my life, I believed you were supposed to keep everyone who ever came in. That loyalty meant holding the door open forever, no matter who walked through it. So I kept them all, the ones who warmed the house and the ones who slowly chilled it. And if you're somewhere past 60, I'd guess you're still holding a door or two yourself. Tonight, I'll name the 5 kinds of people I finally let go and what my quiet became after. This isn't a story about anger. I'm far too old and far too tired for anger now. It's a story about self-respect, the kind that arrives late, but arrives at last. So pour yourself something warm and let an old woman walk you through it, one by one. First, let me tell you who's speaking, so you know these words were paid for in full. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an expert. I never wrote a book or gave a single lecture. I'm a woman who married young, raised children, buried a husband, and kept on walking. I cleaned other people's houses for 30 years, and my hands still remember every floor. My knees ache when the rain comes in, and I take the porch steps slowly now, one at a time. I've been a bride, a mother, a widow, and a stranger to my own face in the glass. So I'm not speaking down to you from anywhere above. I'm sitting right there beside you. Because everything I'm about to say, I wish someone had told me back when I was 50. For most of my years, I thought a good woman never turned anyone away from her table. I thought forgiveness meant letting the same person hurt me again and again and again. I thought keeping the peace meant swallowing my own hurt so the room would stay smooth. So I kept everyone, even the ones whose visits left me smaller than they found me. I gave them my time, my kitchen, my worry, and the little strength I had left to give. And somewhere past 70, I looked around at my own life and saw how tired I had become. Not tired from living, tired from carrying people who never once thought to carry me. There's only so much room in a life, and I'd filled mine with folks who drained it dry. The good ones had to squeeze in at the edges, around all the takers and the fault finders. That was the year I understood something no one had ever said plainly to me before. You are allowed to close a door, not out of hatred, out of respect for your own peace. Letting someone go is not the same as wishing them harm. I wish them all well from here, but I wish them well from a distance now, with the door gently, finally shut between us. I didn't announce it. I didn't send an angry letter or make a single dramatic scene. I simply stopped pouring myself out for people who only ever came to be filled. The calls I didn't return, the invitations I let pass, the room I quietly made in my days. And into that room, my dear, came the most surprising guest of my whole long life: peace. So let me tell you who I let go, and maybe you'll find a face or two that you recognize. Take the ones that fit your life. Leave the rest right here. That's how wisdom has always worked. I'm not a wise woman. I'm just an old one who kept the wrong people far too long. You don't have to be strong to do this. You only have to be tired enough, the way I was. The first person I let go is the one who only ever came to me when they needed something. Every family has one, and for 40 years, mine was a cousin, I'll leave without a name here. He was charming as a summer morning, and he could make you laugh until your sides hurt. But he only ever appeared when the rent was late or the car had broken down again. The phone would ring and my heart would lift, thinking he'd call just to hear my voice. And then came the favor, always a favor, wrapped in a little warmth to make it go down. I lent him money I didn't have. I signed papers. I made up the spare bed and asked nothing. When my husband was dying, I called him, needing nothing but a familiar face beside me. He was busy. He was always busy. The moment the giving turned around and pointed at me. He didn't come to the funeral. He sent no card. But 3 months later, the phone rang again. And there it was, the warmth, the laugh, and then the favor, the same as it ever was. I sat with that silent knowing for a long while, holding it like a stone in my hand. A bond where one hand only ever takes and the other only ever gives is not really love. It's a slow robbery, and you hand over the key yourself, year after year, out of hope. So the next time he called with his warm voice and his familiar need, I stayed quiet. I said, I'm not able to help this time. And I did not offer a reason or an apology. He was surprised. He pushed a little. And when the giving stopped, so did his calling. That was the whole answer right there. The silence that came once I closed my purse. It stung, my dear. I won't pretend it didn't. 40 years is a long time to be someone's well. But a well that's always drawn from and never filled will run dry and crack in the end. I let him go, wished him well, and stopped waiting on a phone that only wanted my hands. If someone only finds you when they're empty, ask when they last helped you fill back up. The second person I let go is the one who would never let me leave my old mistakes behind. We all did foolish things when we were young. I did plenty, and I've made my peace with them. But there was a woman in my life who kept every one of mine filed away like evidence. Whenever I grew or changed or tried something new, she reminded me of who I used to be. Remember when you did this. Remember how you failed at that. Remember, remember, remember. She dressed it up as truth-telling, but it was a leash, and she held the other end of it tight. Every time I stood a little taller, she found a way to sit me back down in my past. I'd leave her kitchen feeling 2 full inches shorter than when I'd walked in her door. For years, I thought that was just how old friends were, that she was keeping me humble. But there's a difference between a friend who knows your history and a jailer who won't unlock it. One day, I mentioned a small class I'd signed up for, painting, at 70-some years old, and she laughed and said, You never could stick to anything. Don't you remember?" Something in me went very still. I did remember, but I was no longer that frightened girl. I had buried a husband and raised his children and survived things she never saw me survive. And I decided I would not spend my last good years being introduced to my own worst days. I didn't argue. I finished my painting class, and I simply stopped bringing her my news. The visits grew fewer, and I let them. Some people can only love the you they look down on. You are not the worst thing you ever did. You are not the girl who stumbled at 50. Anyone who keeps handing you your past is not your friend. They're the weight you've dragged. So I set that weight down, and you would not believe how straight my back grew without it. Keep the people who cheer when you rise. Let go of the ones who only recall you falling. Your history belongs to you. You decide who's allowed to keep bringing it up to your face. The third person I let go is the one who could never once be glad for me. You know the kind. You bring them good news, and you watch their face go tight and small. I had a friend like that most of my life, since we were young mothers on the same street. If my roses bloomed, hers had bloomed bigger. If my child did well, her child did better. When something good finally came to me, she'd find the one loose thread and pull it. I remember the day my grandson graduated, the first in our family to finish college at all. I was so proud I could have floated clear up off the ground and out over the rooftops. I told her, and she paused and said, "Well, let's hope he can find work in times like these." And just like that, the balloon in my chest went soft and sank down to the floor. I used to make myself smaller around her so my joy wouldn't cost me her friendship. I'd hide my good news, or shrink it, or apologize for it to keep the peace between us. But joy that has to hide itself to survive is not joy for very long. It curdles into ash. One evening I understood that a friend who can't be happy for you isn't much of a friend. She's a mirror that only shows your smudges and never once the light in your own face. I didn't confront her. There was nothing to win, and I was too old for that kind of fight. I just stopped bringing her the tender things. I saved my good news for hands that would hold it. And slowly, without a single harsh word, the friendship thinned out like the winter light. I don't hate her. She was carrying her own disappointments, and my joy pressed on the bruise. But I could not keep dimming myself so she wouldn't see how bright I still might be. Find the people who clap when you win. They are rarer than gold and worth a great deal more. And gently, quietly, stop handing your best news to the ones who only ever spoil it. The fourth person I let go is the one who brought a storm through my door every single time. There's a difference between a friend in trouble and a person who lives inside the trouble. We all have hard seasons, and a real friend you carry through them gladly as they'd carry you. But this was a woman for whom the sky was always falling and had been for 30 years. Every visit was a fresh catastrophe, a feud, a betrayal, a scare, a war with a neighbor. She never asked how I was. There was never any room left in it for a word about my life. I'd hang up the telephone and feel like I'd been wrung out and hung on the line to dry. My own good mood, if I'd had one, would be gone, soaked up by her endless gray weather. For years I thought listening was my duty, that a good woman absorbs everyone's rain. I believed if I just loved her enough or listened long enough, the storms might finally pass. But they never passed, because she didn't want them to. The storm was how she held on to people. And I was 74 years old, giving my few calm afternoons to weather that never cleared. I didn't cut her off cruelly. I just stopped picking up every single time the phone rang. I kept the calls short. I stopped rushing over. I let her storms be her own to weather. It felt selfish at first, I won't lie to you. I'd been trained to feel that peace was selfish. But you are allowed to protect your own calm. You are allowed to want a quiet afternoon. You don't owe anyone unlimited reach into your last good years and your dwindling strength. A person who only brings you their storms will leave you soaked and never bring an umbrella. Love them from a distance if you must, but you are allowed to come in out of their rain. Guard your peace, my dear. At our age, a calm afternoon is not a small thing to give away. The fifth person I let go is the one who had simply stopped seeing me at all. This one is the hardest to name because often it's someone you love with your whole heart. It's the person who talks over you, forgets what you say, and treats your time as worthless. Who cancels without a thought, so sure you'll always just be there, waiting where they left you. For me, it was someone very close, and I spent years excusing all the small unkindnesses. They're busy, I'd say. That's just their way. They don't mean it. They love me deep down. But I'd sit dressed and ready by the window on a Sunday, waiting for a visit that never came. No call, no sorry. Just the slow ache of learning I'd been penciled in and then erased. I'd been treated like furniture, useful when needed, invisible the rest of the long week. And the worst part was how I'd trained them to it, by never once asking for anything better. I'd made myself so easy, so uncomplaining, that my own feelings had stopped counting at all. So one day, gently, I said the truest words I'd held back for years. I said, "That hurt me." I said, "I am worth a phone call. I am worth being told when the plans have changed." It was not a fight. It was a woman deciding she would not be invisible in her own life. Some of them heard me and softened and did better, and those I gladly kept close. But one could not be bothered to see me even after I asked plainly to be seen. And that door, my dear, I closed most gently of all, with the most love and the most grief. Because letting go of someone who forgot you were there is its own quiet kind of mourning. But I could not spend my final years teaching a grown person to notice that I exist. You are not furniture. You are not a convenience. You are a whole person, right to the end. If someone cannot be troubled to see you, you may stop waiting by the window for them. That was the fifth and the heaviest, and the one that gave me back my own front room. Now, letting people go sounds cold when you say it in a list like that, one after another. So let me show you how it actually looked, down in my kitchen, on the phone, at my door. Because wisdom isn't a speech. It's what your two hands do on an ordinary, quiet Tuesday. The first thing I learned is that you almost never have to make a scene to close a door. I never once sent an angry letter. I never had the big dramatic falling out I used to dread. Doors mostly close in silence, a call not returned, an invitation gently allowed to pass. When the cousin phoned for money, I didn't lecture him on 40 years of his taking. I said, "I can't this time," and I let the quiet do the rest. The quiet said everything. You don't owe anyone a courtroom trial before you're allowed to protect your own peace. No is a complete sentence, my dear. I spent 70 years not knowing that. Now I do. The second thing I learned is that guilt will come knocking, and you needn't let it in. The first Sunday I didn't rush to that thankless visit, I felt like a criminal all day long. I've been taught that a good woman gives until there's nothing left, and then gives her bones. So sitting still in my own quiet house felt like a sin I'd surely be punished for later. But the punishment never came. The sky held, and the next quiet Sunday felt a little easier. Guilt is just an old habit wearing a Sunday dress. You can nod at it and still not obey it. The third thing I learned is to notice how I feel after, not just how sweet they are during. Some people are lovely in the room and leave you emptied out the moment that they have gone. So now, after I see someone, I ask myself one plain question. Do I feel warmer or wrung out? Your own body keeps a truer record than your manners will ever let your mouth admit. The fourth thing I learned is that the good people had been waiting in the wings all along. When I stopped pouring my hours into the takers, I finally had time for the ones who gave. There's a widow down my street, and a woman from the choir, and a neighbor with kind eyes. I'd never had the strength left over for them, spent as I was on people who drained me dry. Now we have our tea on Thursdays, and I laugh more at 80 than I ever did at 50. Let me tell you, the room you clear of the wrong people does not stay empty for very long. The right ones move in, quiet and grateful, and they fill the house with a warmer light. The fifth thing I learned is that some of these doors are only closed part way, and that's fine. Not everyone gets sent away from the kingdom. Some just get moved to a farther, safer room. The stormy friend I still love. I just don't answer every call, and I keep the visits short. You can lower someone from the center of your life to the edge without a word of war. Distance is a gift you can give quietly, and most folks never even notice the furniture moved. And the last thing I learned is the hardest, so lean in close while I tell you this one. Sometimes the person you most need to stop letting hurt you is someone you truly love. That door doesn't close in anger. It closes in grief, with tears, and it closes anyway. Because loving someone has never once meant you must hand them the key to your own ruin. You can love a person deeply and still decide you will not be small around them anymore. Sometimes I imagine sitting across from myself at 40, that anxious young woman I used to be. She kept everyone. She was so afraid that setting one soul down would make her hard and unkind. I know just what I'd tell her, and I'd hold both her tired hands so she couldn't turn away. I'd say, keeping a person who hurts you is not kindness. It's fear wearing kindness's old coat. I'd say, you are allowed to love people from a distance and still call that love, my girl. I'd say, the room you're so afraid to empty will fill again with people who deserve the chair. I'd say, your peace is not a selfish thing. It's the soil everyone you love actually grows in. I'd say, a door closed gently is not cruelty. Sometimes it's the kindest thing two people can do. I can't reach that frightened young woman now, across all the long years between us. But maybe, tonight, across this little light, I can reach you before you waste as long as I did. Now let me tell you why this is so hard, why so few of us ever learn it while we are young. When you're a girl, You're taught that a woman's worth is measured by how much she endures, that the good ones keep everyone, forgive everything, and never, ever turn a soul away. Loyalty gets tangled up with suffering until you can't tell holding on from being held down. And so we keep the takers and the fault finders and the ones who leave us wrung out. We call it being a good woman, but it's mostly just being afraid to be thought unkind. Here is what a long life teaches you, slowly, if you let it teach you anything at all. Your time is not endless. It never was, but at 75, you can feel the edges of it. When you're young, time feels like a wide ocean you can spill however carelessly you please. Now it feels like the last warm inches of coffee in the cup, and I sip them, slow and grateful. And you learn you cannot spend those last warm inches on people who only pour you out. It isn't bitterness that closes the door. It's love, finally turned toward your own tired self. Every hour I gave to someone who drained me was an hour stolen from someone who'd have filled me, including me. I was on that list of people I'd forgotten to be good to, right at the bottom. So closing those 5 doors was never really about them at all when I look back on it now. It was about opening one door I'd kept shut my whole life, the one to my own quiet peace. Let me tell you about one evening this spring, for it's the nearest I can come to showing you. It was raining, the slow and steady kind, and my little house was quiet, and I was alone. Years ago, an evening like that would have found me anxious, waiting on a phone that stayed still, wondering why the thankless ones hadn't called, making excuses for the ones who never saw me. But this evening, I sat in my rocker with my coffee, and the quiet did not ache one bit. Because it was not the quiet of being forgotten. It was the quiet of a house finally at rest. No storm was coming through the door, no one there to hand me my past or to spoil my joy. Just me and the rain and the good lamp and the few dear faces I had chosen to keep close. And I understood, rocking there, that I had not lost those 5 people. I had found myself. The door I closed on them was the same door I opened on my own last, best, quiet years. That is what self-respect is, in the end. Not a loud thing, not an angry thing, a quiet thing. It's an old woman in a rocking chair, at peace, in a house with room to breathe at last. So here is what I want to ask of you before you turn off the light and go to sleep tonight. Not all 5 doors. Just think of one. One person who leaves you smaller every single time. You don't have to shout at them or send a letter or have the big scene you've been dreading. You only have to stop pouring yourself out for someone who only ever came to be filled. Let one call go unreturned this week. Keep one visit short. Say one gentle, quiet no. Notice how you breathe a little easier, how the room feels a little more like your own again. That's all it takes to begin. One small door, closed softly, out of respect for your peace. I did every hard part of this myself, with a pounding heart and shaking hands. None of it felt brave while I did it. The first quiet no felt exactly like being a bad woman. Courage isn't the fear leaving. It's closing the door gently while your whole hand still shakes. So let your hand shake, my dear, and close the door anyway. That's the secret, and now it's yours. Here is the truth I most want you to carry out of this room and into your quiet night. It is not too late. It is not too late to stop keeping the people who cost you your peace. You are not unkind for wanting calm. You are not selfish for guarding your last good years. You are not running out of time to live in a house that feels like your own again at last. Whatever you've been enduring out of an old fear, you are allowed to gently set it down. I spent 60 years thinking a good woman keeps everyone. She doesn't. She keeps the right ones. And she keeps herself, my dear. She finally, at long last, remembers to keep her own self, too. I've buried more people than I can name in one sitting, and still I sit here and tell you to hope. Not because I'm foolish, but because I've seen what a crowded, draining life costs, and it's everything. A house full of the wrong people is far lonelier than a quiet house that is truly your own. Hope is choosing to believe the right ones are still out there, waiting for the room you will clear. And they are, my dear. There is a widow down every street, longing for a friend just like you. So close the door that needs closing and leave the porch light on for the ones worth keeping. If this old voice reached you tonight, then stay a while, subscribe, and come sit with me again. There's a chair here for you whenever the house gets too quiet and the night runs on too long. And next time, I want to tell you about the words I wish I'd said before it was too late. The things we leave unspoken to the people we love, and how to say them while there's still time. I'm calling it the things to say before you can't. But it's really about the love we're still holding. So bring your coffee back to this porch. I'll be right here with the light left on for you. Thank you for staying with me. It means more than